Hello, everyone. Okay, that's take two. Having trouble with the lighting, getting what's on the board here legible. But this says the Harlem Renaissance from 1917 to 1929. This is the unit we're covering in the book this week, or today, I should say. And when was the Harlem Renaissance? It was a period, a movement, also sometimes known as the New Negro movement. It was in the 1920s, roughly, and it took place, as the name would suggest, in Harlem, USA, which is, if you don't know, across 110th Street, as another famous song, as a famous song puts it, uh, in the center of black cultural and political life since the beginning of the 20th century. Um, the Harlem Renaissance took place in Harlem, but it was also really a movement that was international in its scope. So people who were recognizing themselves as the new Negro, such as the writers we're reading here, Claude McKay, County Coolin, um, Arna Botemps, and of course, let's not forget Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, etc. All these great authors, they saw themselves to a large degree as not just African Americans, but as African in the diaspora, African in the international sense, meaning people of African descent living in the United States, living in Africa, living in the West Indies, living in Guyana, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was an international movement, Pan-African was the name it was given at the time, and it was also a socialist movement. As I was saying last time, the many of the people in the black poetic tradition in America were drawn to communism, were drawn to socialism, were drawn to democratic socialism because they saw, when they visited the Soviet Union and so on, a society free from racial segregation and racial discrimination. That racial discrimination was all too real. It wasn't just limited to, like, you can't use this bathroom, or you can't sit at this lunch counter, or you have to sit on the back of the bus. It included full on racial terrorism. Terrorism with a capital T, carried out by extrajudicial, non state actors, paramilitary organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan, as if maybe you've seen the Black Klansman, this movie with Spike Lee made a couple years ago. Not a great movie, but that's another story. That movie suggests a very true thing, though. It's not actually pointed out enough in the film, if you ask me, that the people in the Klan, the terrorists, were basically the regular authorities during the day. The people who ran the churches and ran the schools and were the police officers and were the politicians. They were the ones carrying out the crazy extrajudicial killings of people by lynching, burning crosses, burning down churches, killing people for no apparent reason, like Emmett Till. There was real terrorism throughout the South after the Civil War, and that led to the fact that people of African descent, black people of America, were living in Harlem in such great numbers. They were escaping from terrorist violence throughout the South, throughout the whole period after Reconstruction. So basically from the 1870s up until the 1920s is when this thing we call the Great Migration occurred, where all these black people left the South for places that you now associate them with. Areas like Chicago and the South Side, Detroit, New York City, obviously, and Brooklyn and the Bronx and Harlem and Queens, you name it. Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles, got a black population at this time. Oakland and San Francisco, Seattle's black community. All these people left the South after the Civil War, escaping from terrorism, escaping from white-led terrorism against them. Okay, and they brought their culture. They created new cultures in the cities that they fled to, seeking safety, but not really finding a lot of the safety and security that they were hoping for. Okay, so let's start with again. So this movement was socialist and Pan-African in part as a reaction, a response to the violence, the terrorism that black people experienced in America. So they were like, there has to be some alternative to this way of doing things, okay? And the new Negro was, in a way, particular to Harlem, unique to Harlem, distinctly a product of Harlem, but also international, okay? International, they were looking elsewhere. They were seeking to create solidarity across different peoples because black people around the world were suffering from the effects of European colonization, European imperialism in Africa, in the West Indies, and then there was even Afro-Asian solidarity movements, etc. So it was a very heady time. I'm going to start with just a poem to begin, and this is a poem by Claude McKay. Claude McKay is of West Indian descent. He was born in 1890. He died in 1948. And he's really known above all for his sonnets. These are 14-line poems. We read some of them when we looked at Shelley and Wordsworth and Keats and Byron. The Romantics wrote sonnets. Sonnets of European form, comes from Italy. It's adopted into English at the beginning of modernity. And it became a standard format for poetry, a classical form in the early modern period. Shakespeare wrote sonnets, wrote them in sequences, and Claude McKay is participating in that. He's educated after the manner of like a W.E.B. Du Bois education, where he's supposed to be part of the literary, intellectual talent that can showcase that black people are capable of anything that white culture is capable of, if not more so, okay, as Du Bois would argue. And this poem I'm going to read you here is seen as one of the signal events that started the Harlem Renaissance. It was published in 1919 in, sorry, I just want to get this right, which journal it appeared in. It first appeared in the magazine, a socialist magazine. I thought it was going to be The Crisis, that's why I checked. The socialist magazine, The Liberator, not The Crisis, which is Du Bois' magazine. The Liberator was a socialist magazine, and the poem's called "If We Must Die." If we must die, and then you can imagine where he's going. It's going to sound a lot like someone you're familiar with, maybe Malcolm X. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock of our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. And that's the concept there that he's working with. If we must die, we'll not die on our knees. We'll not die fleeing and running away. We'll die on our feet, fighting the enemy, even though we're outnumbered and so on. Okay, it's a militant attitude, all right? But there's also a lot of joy and humor in this poetry too. McKay, it's not so much that. McKay, I'll read you one other of his poems. McKay is more sincere, earnest in his outlook, and when he's not just outright militant, as in that famous poem. Let's look at on page 65. I know my soul. Sorry, that last one I got so excited. It's on page 63. I know my soul. This is page 65. Again, a sonnet. I know my soul. I plucked my soul out of its secret place and held it to the mirror of my eye, to see it like a star against the sky, a twitching body quivering in space, a spark of passion shining on my face. And I explored it to determine why this awful key to my infinity conspires to rob me of sweet joy and grace. And if the sign may not be fully read, if I can comprehend but not control, I need not gloom my days with futile dread, because I see a part and not the whole. Contemplating the strange, I'm comforted by this narcotic thought. I know my soul. And you see his modernity there. You see, again, just think of it, socialist in it. You see his modernity. He's putting his soul in comparison to what? The universe, the rest of the stars in the heaven. What is it compared to that? It's not much in terms of quantity of existence, as how big it is or how long it's been here. But in terms of quality, it is something. It's not nothing. Okay? And that's really one of the great modern concepts, one of the great modern conceits, is that we are both incredibly small compared to the universe. This is our dawning apprehension of ourselves since the Copernican revolution in the 1500s. But at the same time, because we know that, because we're aware of our own insignificance, we are great. We are great in a fundamentally new way, in a fundamentally grown-up, mature, adult way. Okay? So you see, again, just the basic concept, the basic dialectic, the basic kind of thesis antithesis of the new Negro movement, of the Harlem Renaissance. It's specific to this one little place, this, I don't know, 50, like not even 50 blocks, 110th Street to 55th Street, 45 blocks. From Central Park north to Rucker Park, where they play ball in the summer. That little local place, but then the universality, the wider significance of it as well. Okay, each of us as an individual, but then our individuality compared to the immensity. Okay, and those two infinities, the infinity of the world around us and the infinity within. The infinity of the greatness of all black people and the greatness of this unique place and time, Harlem in the 1920s. Okay, coming back at you with a couple more lectures in a minute.